The rod of Aaron was not an ordinary staff cut from a tree and then fashioned to suit the brother of Moses. The rod was more like the liahona, which was specially designed and crafted by the Lord for specific purposes. The rod or staff used to miraculous effect during the Exodus is normally called the rod of Aaron, or Aaron's rod. The Lord himself called it Aaron's rod when he commanded that it be placed in the Ark of the Covenant for sacred preservation. Throughout the biblical narrative, the rod belonged primarily to Aaron. Moses used the rod as well. At these times it became the rod of Moses. Yet it was not really the rod of Moses or the rod of Aaron. Neither of them fashioned it, nor did it really belong to either of them. Properly speaking, the rod belonged to God and was called the rod of God. The rod appears for the first time in the story of the Exodus, when the Lord is preparing Moses to confront Pharaoh. The Lord asks Moses to identify the object in his hand. Commentators widely believe that the rod refers to Moses' shepherd's staff. The Lord chooses to use what is at hand to effect his miraculous purpose. But this interpretation is based upon at least two assumptions. First, it assumes that Moses had the staff prior to his encounter with God. The account does not actually say where the rod came from, merely stating that the rod was in Moses' hand. There is nothing to preclude an interpretation that God provided the staff and then asked Moses about it. Second, because Moses was a shepherd at the time, the rod is assumed to be a shepherd's staff. This is possible, but other interpretations are also possible. The Hebrew mata, translated as rod, can mean staff, rod, scepter, or walking stick. Moses twice called the rod of God. This suggests that the rod was not his to begin with, and that it was more than a shepherd's staff or a walking stick. While the biblical account is silent on the origin and nature of the rod, other Jewish sources have much to say about the miraculous instrument. The book of Jasher relates that Moses first saw the rod planted in the garden of Ruel, otherwise called Jethro. The rod is not made of wood, but is a stick of sapphire. Moses miraculously removed the stick from the ground using the name of God. This stick, according to the account in Jasher, was the same stick which had been used earlier by God to perform miracles after the original creation. Jewish legend is more precise on the origin of the rod that became attributed to Aaron. The rod was a special creation, along with many others, made on the sixth day of creation. course, the creation of the rod is described in mythic language and in a mythic setting. The rod, like every other special creation listed in the legend, is based upon a heavenly and planetary archetype. But that does not make it any less real. The Liahona of the Book of Mormon was patterned after the same archetypes and was very real. The core idea is that the rod was created by God Himself and was done so before the dawn of man's dominion on earth.